The wind howled like a dying beast across the frozen wasteland of Zeph 7. Inside the research station, Dr. Kira Velvane worked alone in her laboratory, her blue crystalline skin glowing softly in the dim light. Her 4 arms moved with practiced precision as she mixed chemicals in glass containers. The cure was so close, she could almost taste it. All personnel must evacuate immediately. The station computer announced for the 10th time. Heating systems have failed. Temperature dropping to lethal levels. Kira ignored the warning. The other scientists had left hours ago when the solar storm first hit. Even the hardy Krogans with their thick hides had fled when the temperature dropped below freezing. Only Kira remained, her people's natural resistance to cold keeping her alive where others would have already died. But even Velnari had limits. The pathogen samples in her laboratory held the key to saving millions of lives across 12 different worlds. For 3 years, she had studied this ancient disease that turned living tissue to stone. It had already killed entire colonies. If she left now, if she abandoned her work, countless more would die. Her twin hearts beat slower as the cold crept deeper into the station. Ice crystals began forming on the laboratory walls. The heating system had not just failed. The solar storm had destroyed it completely. Outside, the wind carried particles of frozen atmosphere that cut like tiny knives. Kira's breath came out in white puffs as she worked. Her crystalline skin, normally smooth and warm, began to crack in thin lines across her arms. The cold was winning, but she fought against it with everything she had. She had to finish the cure. Her people, the Velnari, were known throughout the galaxy for their logical minds and emotional control. They did not feel fear or panic like other species. They faced death with calm acceptance. But as Kira felt her body slowly shutting down, something stirred inside her that felt almost like regret. She would die alone. Her research would die with her. The laboratory equipment began to freeze. The delicate chemical reactions she needed required precise temperatures. Soon, even if she lived, the work would be impossible to continue. The cure would remain forever out of reach. Kira's 4 hands trembled as she sealed the last of her research data into the station's protected memory core. At least future scientists might learn from her work, even if they could not complete it. She entered her final notes with fingers that barely responded to her commands. Research log, day 1247. She spoke into the recorder, her voice steady despite her failing body. The cure requires a catalyst that I have not yet identified. Something that can bridge the gap between organic and synthetic compounds. I have tried every known element and chemical combination. The answer exists, but I cannot find it. She paused, her breath coming in short gasps. The cold was like a living thing now, crawling through her chest and wrapping around her heart. If anyone finds this record, know that the pathogen can be stopped. The formula is 97% complete. Find the missing catalyst, and you will save them all. Kira sealed the recording and stumbled away from her workstation. Her legs could barely hold her weight. The crystalline structure of her skin was failing, cracks spreading like a spider web across her body. Soon she would shatter like broken glass. She made her way to the station's main window and looked out at the storm. The rescue ship from her homeworld would not come. They had sent a message hours ago. The solar storm was too dangerous. They would return when it passed, in 3 days. She would be dead long before then. The wind outside grew stronger, shaking the entire station. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned and snapped. The storm was tearing apart everything in its path. Even if rescue came, there might be nothing left to find. Kira pressed her face against the cold window. Her reflection looked back at her. Blue skin now pale and cracked, her normally bright eyes growing dim. She had lived 127 years, longer than most of her people. She had seen wonders across the galaxy and made discoveries that advanced science by decades. It was enough. It had to be enough. She closed her eyes and felt her consciousness beginning to fade. Her twin hearts slowed further, each beat taking more effort than the last. The cold was merciful. In its way. There would be no pain, just a gradual slide into peaceful darkness. But then something changed. Through the howling wind, she heard a new sound. Metal hitting metal. Footsteps on the station's outer deck. Heavy, clumsy footsteps, unlike the graceful movements of her own people. Kira forced her eyes open and pressed closer to the window. Through the swirling snow, she saw a figure stumbling toward the station. It was smaller than a Krogan, larger than a Velnari. The figure wore bulky protective gear that looked primitive compared to modern survival suits. The figure reached the station's main door and began working on the controls. Whoever it was clearly had no idea how Velnari technology worked, but they kept trying. Persistent, in the face of the deadly storm, Kira tried to call out, to warn the stranger away. The station was dying. There was no safety here, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Her strength was almost gone. The door finally opened with a grinding of frozen metal. The stranger stumbled inside, shaking snow from their gear. Through her fading vision, Kira watched as the figure pulled off their helmet, revealing a face she had never seen before. Round features, small eyes, skin the color of earth. A human. What was a human doing this far from their territory? Why would they risk their life in such a storm? The human looked around the station with quick, intelligent eyes. They moved with purpose despite the obvious cold affecting them too. When their gaze found Kira collapsed by the window, they ran toward her without hesitation. "Hey, are you alive?" the human asked, in basic galactic standard. Their voice was rough but kind. "Don't worry. I'm going to help you." Kira tried to respond but could only manage a weak movement of her hand. Darkness was closing in fast. Her body was shutting down completely now. But somehow, the human's presence gave her a strange sense of peace. She would not die alone after all. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the human kneeling beside her, already working to save a life they had never met before. Marcus Chen had seen death before. As a cargo pilot, he had found crashed ships, failed colonies, and worse things scattered across the galaxy's darker corners. But he had never seen anyone die from cold like this. The alien woman's blue skin was cracked like broken ice, and her breathing was so slow he could barely see her chest moving. "Come on," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "Stay with me." Marcus had crashed his own ship 2 kilometers away when the solar storm fried his navigation systems. His cargo hold was full of medical supplies bound for a colony world, but none of it would help here. This was beyond medicine. This was about basic survival. He pulled off his heavy gloves and touched the alien's skin. It was so cold it burned his fingers. But underneath that terrible cold, he could feel something else. A very faint warmth, like the last ember of a dying fire. She was still alive. Barely. Marcus had learned about hypothermia during his military service on frozen worlds. The human body could share heat in ways that sometimes meant the difference between life and death. He had no idea if it would work with an alien, but he had to try. He stripped off his outer coat and heavy sweater. The cold air hit him like a punch, but he ignored it. Carefully, he lifted the alien woman and pulled her against his chest. Her forearms hung limp, but he wrapped them around his body and held her tight. "My name is Marcus," he said, even though she could not hear him. "I'm going to keep you warm. You're going to be okay." The alien's skin was still cracking, but where it touched his body, Marcus felt something strange happening. The cracks seemed to spread slower. The deathly cold began to ease just a little. He pulled his coat over both of them and settled in to wait. The storm raged outside for 3 days. Marcus never let go. He talked to her constantly, telling her about his homeworld, Earth, about his job flying cargo between the stars, about anything that came to mind. He shared his water and even tried to get some liquid between her lips. Most of the time she could not swallow, but sometimes a few drops went down. "You know," he said on the second day, feeling her skin slowly warming against his, "my grandmother used to say that humans are like little furnaces. We burn hot and fast compared to other species. I never thought much about it until now." It was true. Marcus's body temperature remained steady despite the freezing station. His heart pumped blood that carried heat to every part of him, and somehow, that heat was transferring to the alien woman. Her cracks were healing, the blue color returning to her skin. On the third day, she began to tremble. Marcus thought at first that she was getting worse, but then he realized it was different. Her body was shivering, trying to generate its own heat again. Her twin hearts, which had barely been beating, began to pump stronger. "That's it," he encouraged. He had no idea what species she was or what her normal body functions should look like. But he could feel life flowing back into her. Her skin grew warmer. Her breathing deepened. When he checked her pulse points, he found steady rhythms instead of the weak flutter from before. Marcus was exhausted. He had not slept more than a few minutes at a time, afraid that if he relaxed his grip, she would slip away. His own body was pushed to its limits. But humans were stubborn creatures. He would not let her die. Not when he could prevent it. On the fourth morning, the storm finally passed. Sunlight streamed through the station windows for the first time in days. Marcus felt the alien woman stir in his arms. Her breathing changed, becoming deeper and more regular. Then her eyes opened. They were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, large and silver, with flecks of blue that seemed to glow with inner light. For a moment, she just stared at him in confusion. Then awareness came flooding back, and she tried to sit up quickly. "Easy," Marcus said gently, helping her move slowly. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Don't rush it." She looked down at herself, then at him, then around the station. When she spoke, her voice was soft and musical, but the words came in perfect galactic standard. You saved me. But how? The cold should have killed us both." Marcus smiled, suddenly feeling shy. "Humans run hot. Body heat. You know? I just shared mine." She stared at him with those incredible silver eyes. Something was happening in her expression that Marcus could not quite understand. It was like watching someone discover a new color or hearing music for the first time. "I am Kira Velvain," she said finally. "I am in your debt." "Marcus Chen," he replied. "And you don't owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it was not true. Most species he knew would have looked for their own shelter first. They would have calculated the odds and made logical decisions. Only humans seemed to have this stubborn refusal to let others die alone. Kira sat up fully, her forearms moving to steady herself. She looked at her hands in wonder, flexing her fingers as if seeing them for the first time. The cracks in her skin had healed completely, leaving only faint lines like old scars. "What did you do to me?" she whispered. "I kept you warm," Marcus said, confused by her reaction. "That's all." But Kira was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on any alien face before. It was not gratitude or relief. It was something deeper, more profound. Like she was looking at him and finally understanding something that had been hidden from her all her life. "Warm," she repeated, as if the word had new meaning. "Yes, but not just my body. Something else. Something—" She touched her chest where her hearts beat. Her silver eyes were wide with wonder and something that looked almost like fear. "What is your species called?" she asked. "Human," Marcus said. "We're from Earth, in the Sol system. Not very important in galactic politics." Kira shook her head slowly. "I think you are more important than you know." Outside, they could hear the sound of approaching ships. Rescue had finally arrived. But Marcus found himself reluctant to let this moment end. Something had happened here. Something more than just saving a life. He could see it in Kira's eyes, feel it in the way she moved. The cold had nearly killed her. But in fighting it off together, they had discovered something neither of them expected. Something that would change everything. "The ships are coming," Kira said softly. "They will want to separate us, to study what happened." But Marcus. She reached out with one of her 4 hands and touched his face gently. Her skin was warm now, alive with new energy. "What you gave me, what you shared, it cannot be taken away." And Marcus did not understand her words, but he understood the feeling behind them. Whatever had happened during those 3 days, it was just the beginning. The Velnari medical team surrounded Kira the moment the rescue ships landed. Dr. Thane Morak, her research supervisor, scanned her with every instrument they had brought. His silver eyes showed nothing but cold scientific curiosity. "Impossible?" he muttered, studying the readings. "Your neural patterns have changed completely. Brain activity in regions that have been dormant for over 1,000 years. What happened to you?" "Both. Both. Both." Kira sat on the medical table, very aware of Marcus standing in the corner of the room. The human looked tired and worried. She wanted to go to him, to thank him properly, but something in Dr. Morak's tone warned her to be careful. "I nearly died from the cold," she said simply. "Mr. Chen saved my life by sharing his body heat." Dr. Morak's assistant, a younger Velnari named Zira, looked up from her scanner with alarm. "Doctor, the readings are getting stronger." Whatever happened to her, it's still happening. Kira felt it too. Since waking up in Marcus's arms, everything seemed different. Colors looked brighter. Sounds carried emotions she had never noticed before. When she looked at Marcus, something warm spread through her chest that had nothing to do with temperature. "You will need extensive testing," Dr. Morak declared. "This contamination must be understood before it spreads to others." "Contamination?" Marcus stepped forward, anger clear in his voice. "She's not contaminated. She's healthy. Better than healthy." Dr. Morak looked at the human like he was examining an interesting but unimportant specimen. "Human emotional responses are well documented. Your species lacks proper emotional control. What you see as improvement, we recognize as degradation of logical function." Kira felt something flare inside her that she had never experienced before. It was hot and protective and completely irrational. She wanted to defend Marcus, to make Dr. Morak understand how wrong he was. "Marcus saved my life," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "Show some respect." The room fell silent. Every Velnari stared at her in shock. Kira had never spoken with emotion before. None of them had. It was not the Velnari way. Dr. Morak's scanner began beeping rapidly. Emotional response confirmed. "The contamination is severe. You must come with us immediately for treatment." "Treatment?" Kira stood up, her 4 arms moving in defensive positions she had never used before. "I don't need treatment. I need to complete my research. The cure for the stone plague is almost finished. Your research will be continued by others," Dr. Morak said coldly. "You are no longer fit for scientific work." Marcus moved to stand beside Kira. "She's the smartest person in this room. Maybe in this whole sector. You can't just throw away her work because she learned to feel things." "Feelings are weakness, Doctor," Morak replied. "They cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. Dr. Velthane was a brilliant scientist. Now she is something else." Kira looked around the room at her own people. She had worked with these scientists for years, but now she saw them differently. Their faces were masks, empty of warmth or joy or any sign of life beyond cold intelligence. Had she looked like that too? "You're wrong," she said quietly. Feelings aren't weakness. They're like a new sense I never had before. I can see connections I missed, understand patterns that pure logic couldn't find. She moved to her computer terminal and called up her research data. Her hands flew across the controls as new ideas flowed through her mind. The missing catalyst for the cure. She could see it now. Clear as sunlight. Watch, she told them, her voice filled with excitement she had never felt before. The cure doesn't just need a chemical catalyst. It needs something organic, something alive. The pathogen turns tissue to stone by removing the life force, the warmth. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she modified her formula. The answer had been there all along, but she had been too logical to see it. The cure needed something that only living beings could provide, the spark of life itself. Human blood, she whispered, looking at Marcus with wide eyes. Your blood has properties that other species don't. The way you generate heat, share warmth. It's not just physical. There's something in your biology that carries life force better than any other species. Marcus stepped closer to look at her screen. You mean I could help cure people? Not just help, Kira said, her voice rising with excitement. You could be the key to saving millions of lives. Your species, your wonderful, warm, emotional species, could end the stone plague forever. Dr. Morak pushed between them and studied the screen. His expression grew more troubled with each line of data he read. This is not science. This is emotional speculation, based on contaminated thinking. This is not science. AMEVR. This is emotional. But his assistant, Zira, was running the calculations on her own terminal. Doctor, the math is correct. More than correct. It's brilliant. This approach would work better than anything we've tried. Impossible, Dr. Morak said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Kira felt that warm feeling in her chest again, stronger now. She recognized it as joy. Pure, overwhelming joy at the discovery. But more than that, she felt something else when she looked at Marcus. Gratitude. Yes, but also affection. Connection. Something that had no logical purpose, but felt more real than anything she had ever experienced. Marcus, she said softly. What you did for me. What your species can do. It's not weakness. It's the strongest thing in the galaxy. Dr. Morak backed away from them both. You are no longer Velnari, he declared. You have been fundamentally altered by exposure to human emotional contamination. You cannot return to our world. Number 4. You are Mentaphor. You are Mentaphor, and declared, you cannot return to our world. The words should have hurt, but Kira felt only pity for him. He was trapped in a cage of logic, unable to see the beauty of what she had discovered. Then I'll go with Marcus, she said without hesitation. I'll help spread this cure across the galaxy, and maybe, along the way, I'll help others understand what I've learned. Marcus smiled at her, a warm, genuine expression that lit up his whole face. Kira felt that warmth spread through her chest again. Team, partnership, friendship. Words that had meant nothing to her before now carried weight and meaning beyond logic. Yes, she agreed, reaching out to take his hand in one of hers. We do. Dr. Morak and his team left without another word, taking their cold disapproval with them. But Kira felt no sadness watching them go. She had gained something far more valuable than their approval. She had learned to feel. And feeling, she realized, was not contamination. It was evolution. News of Kira's transformation spread across the galaxy faster than Marcus had thought possible. They had been together for 6 months now, traveling from world to world, distributing the cure for the stone plague. Everywhere they went, the same pattern emerged: amazement at the cure's effectiveness, followed by fascination with the partnership between human and Velnari. Marcus watched Kira work with a group of sick children on Theta 9. Her 4 arms moved gently as she administered the treatment, and her silver eyes glowed with warmth as she spoke softly to each patient. The cure worked perfectly, but it was more than medicine that healed them. It was the caring in her voice, the comfort in her touch. "She's different from other Velnari," observed Dr. Sarah Kim, the human medical officer running the clinic. "There's something warm about her. I've never seen that in her species before." "She learned to feel," Marcus said simply. "It changed everything." Dr. Kim looked at him with curiosity. "The reports say you saved her life by sharing body heat, but the medical readings suggest something more happened." Marcus nodded. He had read the reports too. Scientists across the galaxy were studying what they called the Velthane event. Some claimed it was impossible. Others insisted it was dangerous. But none of them could deny the results. The cure had saved over 2 million lives so far. More importantly, Kira's new way of thinking had revolutionized medical science. Her combination of Velnari intelligence and human intuition produced breakthroughs that pure logic had missed for centuries. "Marcus," Kira called from across the clinic. "Come, meet someone." She was standing with a tall, graceful being that Marcus recognized as a Velnari elder, one of the oldest and most respected members of their species. The elder's silver eyes studied Marcus with intense curiosity. "This is Elder Senthara," Kira said. "She has traveled far to speak with us." The elder bowed formally. "Human Marcus Chen, your actions have caused great debate among our people." Marcus felt nervous under that ancient gaze. "I hope that's not a bad thing." Elder Senthara was quiet for a long moment. "For 1,000 years, we, Velnari, have believed that emotion was weakness. We evolved beyond it to achieve perfect logic and scientific advancement. But your partnership with Kira has shown us something we did not expect." She gestured to a young Velnari who had been watching from the corner. "This is my student, Genkar. 3 days ago, they volunteered to work with human medical teams on a plague world. The experience has changed them." Marcus looked at Genkar and saw what Elder Senthara meant. The young Velnari's eyes held the same warmth he saw in Kira's. Their movements were more fluid, more expressive. They looked alive in a way that other Velnari did not. "I felt it happen," Genkar said, their voice filled with wonder. "Working alongside humans, seeing their compassion for the sick, their refusal to give up on patients that logic said could not be saved. Something awakened in me. Something beautiful." Elder Senthara nodded slowly. "It is spreading. Young Velnari who work with humans are experiencing this awakening. Our scientists call it contamination, but I have lived long enough to recognize evolution when I see it." Kira moved to stand beside Marcus, her hand finding his. The gesture would have meant nothing to old Kira, but now it was natural as breathing. "What are you saying, Elder?" "I am saying that perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps emotion is not weakness, but strength we abandoned too soon. Your cure proves that logic alone cannot solve every problem. Sometimes we need heart as well as mind." The elder's words were interrupted by an urgent communication alert. Marcus's ship computer activated its emergency broadcast system. "Priority message from Earth Command," the computer announced. "Medical emergency on Velnari homeworld Kronos. Requesting immediate assistance." Marcus and Kira exchanged glances. A medical emergency on the Velnari homeworld was almost impossible. Their advanced medicine could handle any known disease. Elder Senthara's face went pale. "Show us the message." The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Rodriguez from Earth's Medical Corps. Her expression was grim. "This message is for Marcus Chen and Dr. Kira Velthane. We've received a desperate request from the Velnari High Council. A new plague has struck their homeworld, something their medicine cannot treat. It appears to target their neural pathways, specifically the regions responsible for logical thinking. Victims are dying within hours of infection. Marcus felt Kira's hand tighten on his. Their logic centers, she whispered. If the plague attacks logic, then traditional Velnari medicine would be useless against it. The Admiral continued. The Velnari have requested human medical assistance, despite their previous statements that our medicine is primitive. They specifically asked for you, too. The situation is critical. Over 100,000 are already infected. Elder Senthara stood slowly, her ancient face showing more emotion than Marcus had ever seen on a Velnari. This is not coincidence. The plague targets what we value most, our logical minds. Perhaps the universe is telling us something. Kira was already moving toward Marcus's ship. We have to go. My people need help. Wait, Marcus called after her. Your own people exiled you. They called your emotions contamination. Why would you risk your life for them? Kira stopped and turned back to him. Her silver eyes were bright with tears, something no Velnari had shed in 1,000 years. Because that's what you taught me, she said simply. You don't abandon people who need help, even if they've hurt you. That's what makes humans special. That's what I learned when you refused to let me die in the cold. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and affection. In 6 months, Kira had become more human than most humans he knew. Not by losing her own nature, but by adding humanity's best qualities to her Velnari strengths. Then we go together, he said. Like we always do. Elder Senthara bowed deeply to them both. You carry our hopes with you. Perhaps this plague is not a disaster, but an opportunity. A chance for our people to learn what you have learned. As they prepared for departure, Marcus wondered if they were flying toward salvation or disaster. The Velnari had rejected emotion for a millennium. Would they be willing to embrace it now, when their very survival depended on it? Looking at Kira's determined face, he knew they were about to find out. The galaxy was about to discover whether humanity's greatest gift, their stubborn refusal to let others suffer alone, could save an entire species from itself. The Velnari homeworld of Kronos was dying. Marcus could see it as soon as their ship entered the atmosphere. The great crystal cities that had stood for millennia were dark, their normal blue glow replaced by the harsh red light of emergency systems. Ships fled the planet in streams, carrying those who could escape. It's worse than I thought, Kira whispered, her 4 hands pressed against the viewport. Where there should have been the ordered movement of a functioning society, Marcus saw only chaos. Emergency vehicles moved without purpose. Medical personnel wandered in confusion. The plague was destroying more than bodies. It was destroying the logical structure that held Velnari civilization together. Their ship was met by Dr. Thane Morak, the same supervisor who had called Kira contaminated months earlier. But now, his cold confidence was gone. His silver eyes showed something Marcus had never seen in a Velnari before: fear. Dr. Velthane, he said formally, though his voice shook. Thank you for coming. We were wrong about you. About many things. Kira stepped forward, and Marcus was proud to see no anger in her expression, only concern for her people. What can you tell us about the plague? Dr. Morak led them through corridors filled with confused Velnari. Scientists sat staring at equations they could no longer understand. Medical personnel stood helplessly beside patients they could not diagnose. The plague had not just taken their logic, it had taken their identity. It began 3 days ago, Dr. Morak explained. The infection attacks the neural pathways responsible for logical thinking. Within hours, victims lose the ability to reason, to calculate, to function as Velnari. They become emotional, Kira finished quietly. Yes. But without any framework to understand emotions, they descend into madness. We have lost some of our greatest minds. If we cannot find a cure within days, our entire civilization will collapse. They reached the main medical bay, where hundreds of infected Velnari lay in various states of confusion. Some wept uncontrollably, the first tears shed on Kronos in 1,000 years. Others laughed at nothing, overwhelmed by joy they had never felt before. Many simply stared in wonder at their own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. Marcus watched a young Velnari scientist trying desperately to solve a simple math problem, tears streaming down her crystalline face. "I can't think," she whispered. "I can't think." "The infection is not killing them directly," Dr. Morak said. "But they stop eating. Stop caring for themselves. They die from the shock of feeling without understanding." Kira moved among the patients with growing understanding. "They're experiencing what I did, but without guidance, without someone to help them through the transition." She knelt beside an elderly Velnari male who was curled in a corner, trembling. When she touched his arm gently, he looked up at her with desperate eyes. "I feel everything," he whispered. "It hurts. It's beautiful. I don't understand." "I know," Kira said softly. "I felt the same way. But it gets better. The feelings become manageable." Marcus realized what needed to happen. They need what you had. They need guidance through the emotional awakening. But more than that. He looked at Dr. Morak. They need human contact. Dr. Morak stepped back instinctively. The emotional transition that saved Kira wasn't just from the plague ending, Marcus explained. It was from learning to process feelings with help. She learned by being close to a human, by experiencing emotions alongside someone who understood them. Kira stood up, her eyes bright with realization. The cure isn't medical. It's social. They need to learn to feel. By feeling with humans. Dr. Morak looked horrified. "You're suggesting we touch them? Allow emotional contamination to spread further?" "I'm suggesting you save your people," Kira said firmly. "This isn't contamination, it's evolution. Your species is being forced to take the next step, whether you want to or not." Marcus activated his communication system. "This is Marcus Chen calling all human medical ships in the sector. We need volunteers for a humanitarian mission on Kronos. Bring everyone you can. Great problem. Great problem. Great problem." Within hours, human medical ships began arriving. Doctors, nurses, counselors, and volunteers poured into the medical centers. But more than medical expertise, they brought something the Velnari had lost centuries ago: the ability to feel and help others through their feelings. The transformation began slowly. Human medical workers paired with infected Velnari, offering the same simple comfort that Marcus had given Kira: physical warmth, emotional support, and patient guidance through the chaos of awakening feelings. Marcus watched Dr. Sarah Kim sit with a young Velnari researcher, holding her hand while she cried through her first experience of sadness. An engineer named Tom Rodriguez worked with an elderly Velnari philosopher, helping him understand that wonder and joy were not madness, but gifts. "Look," Kira said, pointing across the room. A group of Velnari who had received human comfort were now helping others. They moved with the same gentle care that humans showed, their newfound emotions allowing them to recognize and ease suffering in their fellows. The emotional awakening was spreading, but now it carried understanding instead of confusion. Dr. Morak stood beside them, watching his people transform. "In 3 days, they have changed more than we did. In 3 centuries of evolution," he said wonderingly. "They're still intelligent, still capable of science and logic. But now they have something more. They have heart," Marcus said simply. Over the following weeks, the transformation continued across Kronos. Velnari society restructured itself around cooperation instead of cold efficiency. Their science became more creative, their medicine more compassionate. They were still themselves, but they were more than they had been. Kira and Marcus stood together on the observation deck of the medical center, watching Velnari and humans working side by side in the gardens below. Children of both species played together, learning from each other naturally. "You did this," Marcus said. "You showed them the way." Kira leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "We did this. Together. Just like everything else." Elder Senthara approached them, her ancient face now warm with expression. "The High Council wishes to thank you both. You have not just saved our people. You have shown us who we could become." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. The elder smiled, something that would have been impossible weeks earlier. "Now, we learn. We send our young ones to work with humans across the galaxy. We teach emotion, alongside logic, in our schools. We become partners instead of observers." She paused, looking at Marcus and Kira together. "And we remember that the greatest discoveries come not from cold analysis, but from the warmth of beings who refuse to let others face the darkness alone." Months later, Marcus and Kira received a message from Dr. Morak. The stone plague had been completely eradicated using the cure they developed. More importantly, a dozen new medical breakthroughs had emerged from Velnari-human cooperation. Diseases that had puzzled scientists for centuries were falling to the combined power of logic and intuition, reason, and compassion. "The galaxy is changing," Kira observed as they read the reports together aboard their ship. "Species are starting to work together instead of in isolation." Marcus smiled, remembering a dying alien in a frozen station who had become the catalyst for a revolution of understanding. "All because you were willing to let a strange human keep you warm." Kira laughed, a sound that still amazed her sometimes. All because a strange human was willing to risk his life for someone he had never met. Outside their ship, the stars shone with possibilities neither of them could have imagined. Across the galaxy, beings were learning that strength came not from superiority or isolation, but from the simple willingness to reach out and touch another life with warmth and care. The cold that had almost claimed Kira had been defeated not by technology or medicine, but by the fundamental human truth that no one should face the darkness alone. And in learning to share that warmth, the galaxy itself had been transformed. It had all begun with a touch, a human touch that changed everything.